name is Dara Tomasson, and welcome to the Client Corner. So this episode is talking about clients' quilts and how I decided to quilt it. So if you are interested in my Client Corner, I do it once a month and it's super fun. And if you want to be featured on Client Corner, you can just mail me your quilt. And I would love to do an episode and talk about the process of how I do this. So if you don't want to miss out, you just have to press subscribe, and then there's like a little bell that says notification when I have new videos available, and they come out every Wednesday at noon Pacific time. So please consider, if you love that, you don't want to miss any, so subscribe to that and that would be awesome. Okay, so today's quilt has actually been mailed to me from Edmonton, and this is a wedding anniversary quilt. And so I was thrilled to receive it. There is a ton of open space. It's all very low volume with a very classic design, very low on the piecing. And so when you get a quilt like that with the low volume, very minimal piecing, we really want the quilt to have some beautiful textures to let it really pop. So I do love the simplicity of the fabric. I love the simplicity of the piecing. In fact, these are kind of some of my favorite quilts because I like to do the quilting part. So this is what I'm gonna talk about the process of how I decided what designs to use and how to use them. And then just making sure that when you have this many designs, that they're really going to work together and look really, really good. So as you can see here, I have a super wide outer border. So this is a king size quilt and it's going to be on her bed. And so she made this really large border. Now the fabric is a very circular, kind of a ripple effect, kind of print, tone on tone with cream. So when you have a fabric like that, it's like you have to decide, do I want to compete with the fabric or do I want to complement the fabric? So I decided in this situation, it would be a really nice thing to complement the fabric by using a circular design. So I have used my favorite rainbow swirl all over design on the border. However, because it's such a big wide border, I didn't want to just have the rainbow swirls on it. I wanted to just take it to another level and add like more depth to the design. So I decided to take my rulers and use those to create these really cool designs. And so I'm going to feature the different types of circles that I did. So even though you're using the same rulers, you can create lots of different designs. In fact, that's like really fun for my brain because I want to play around. And so this is why one of the reasons I love quilting for people is because they're actually paying for me to play and to experiment. Okay, so these are the rulers that I use. They're a 2, a 4, a 6, 8, 10, and 12-inch ruler set. So they all fit inside of each other and they work really well. So that was something that I had in my ruler stash, and I thought let's like play around with the rulers. If you are a digital quilter, then you can just create circles on your machine. You can just put in the dimensions, but that's what I have that I've used. So deciding on where I place the larger rulers is just kind of random, because if you're really worried about having it super symmetrical, then I would just choose to do the random, just kind of wherever the circles go. Another thing that when I was putting the circles, deciding on the border, some of the circles started from the outside of the border, some were just part of, like I cut the circle in half and just kind of created that on the edge of the border. So you will see examples of that as I go on. Next thing that I had to decide was she had an inner border that was also quite a large inner border. And so again, trying to decide, do I want to compete with the previous stitching with all the circles, or do I want to provide some contrast? And so opposites attract, as we know. And so I decided to use a very nice straight line design, kind of like a modified herringbone. And so really when you have that very angular design, it's a great contrast from the circles. It also breaks up the space, and it also provides a lot of continuity, and so the eye just travels along really nicely. And again, it provides a really nice texture. Now, because I was worried about making sure that everything was exact, I offset my herringbone design. So, and you'll see that as I show you in the design. So the next thing to consider is this quilt has these large ribbons or bands. And so to create, and they're all created with their own unique fabric. So I wanted to really emphasize that they are their own band and their own fabric. And so I was able to assign a specific design to each one of those ribbons or bands. And so one of the tricks that you need to do when you're creating those complementary designs is that you need to have a very consistent fill. So we don't want to have too much open space in one band and not enough, and then super dense in the other one. It could have too much of a contrast, and it could be a little bit jarring. And I have an example of that. So when I haven't quite finished this client quilt yet, because I wanted to kind of show you some of the progress pics on really seeing like what a difference that makes with not having the complementary level of texture. So that's a really important element to consider when you are making your quilting decisions. Okay, so the other part of this quilt, because it has these different bands, it also has its own fill or open space that you need to have a consistent fill. So that was really a great way to kind of have that continuity throughout the bands. So having one designated fill for the open space or like the body of the quilt really helps give that distinction for each of the bands. Another thing to consider is the color of thread that you're using. So if you want a large contrast of thread, then what's going to happen is the thread contrast is going to kind of take over, or do you want to have the texture take over? And so that's really important to consider, because a contrasting thread does really pop and it looks really great. But if you want kind of this really beautiful, gorgeous texture on a quilt, if you have a contrasting thread, that's going to really draw the eye and not really allow you to focus so much on the texture. So that is something to consider. With this quilt, because the fabrics are all fairly neutral, I was actually able to use a slightly off-white thread. In fact, this quilt I'm using Omni. I normally use So Fine, but I didn't have the right color, and this Omni thread actually performed really well. I used a 3.5 needle, which I didn't think was possible, and so and actually on this quilt I'm at 14 bobbins. So there's a lot of thread in this quilt. And I'm keeping track of my bobbins, which I'm very, so that's been kind of fun to like see how many. So I'm going to now show you the different designs and kind of how you're going to create them. And then maybe, so I'm going to show you different designs, how I decided to create them, and really showing how you can use the contrasting designs to really create a lot of emphasis and pop in the quilting. All right, so what I've done is I have created these really fun circular designs in the border. It's such a massive, bold, fun border, and I really wanted to show that off. I also really wanted to create some like fun for me as a quilter to create a new new spaces, break it up, challenge my brain. So I did the larger circle here. I came back in and did a little border, and I did the same thing here. I put like very small pebbling in the center and then kind of a larger pebble on this one, and then left this nice and open because I really wanted to have a really nice contrast with my rainbow swirls here. And so you can see in the notes, we have pictures of each individual circle. So even though I was using the exact same rulers, every circle is different. So that was super fun for me to try new things. You don't want to have too many designs within that. So basically I used 3 things in each one of these circles. I used the actual circles of the rulers. I used pebbling in the circles, and then I used straight lines. So then I did variations of all of those. And then also I used echoing in the circles as well. So what I talk about with my advice for custom work is like pick 3 designs, for example, and then do variations of those 3 designs. And I have more on this one just because it's a larger quilt and has more custom, but I'm gonna talk about how I'm re-emphasizing the designs that I have. So for example, I have some of these circles have some lines in them because on the secondary border I have here, okay, I'm always going to be picking threads, but on here I'm using a ruler. So then I'm going to show you where I'm emphasizing the ruler again. With the pebbling, I'm going to have pebbling in my fill. And so this way we're really emphasizing and just having a lot of continuity within the quilt. So it's not too much of a contrast, but your eyes can kind of flow and they're kind of looking for similar designs in there. So this is my open space on the quilt. And so I really wanted to have a very beautiful filler. So this is kind of like a seashell. These actually remind me of those like chocolate seashells. And then I do some pebbling. And then within the pebbling, several of them, I don't know, I just call these like little dimples in the pebbling, and they just kind of they kind of mock the way that the seashell starts, and so that's really fun. So this is very similar density and just a really pretty fill. And then this pattern here, it already had the lines in it. And so this texture is amazing. I love it. So I did 2 lines and then I left a line and then 2 lines, left a line, 2 lines, left a line, and then I did it the other way around. So that creates a really nice texture. On here, I actually just I kind of freehand zigzags, and then I went back and I just filled in these sides. And that's a really fun, I'm using, of course, for all my custom quilting, I use 2 layers of batting, one of 80-20 on the bottom, and then wool on the top. Sometimes I will use polyester on top, but I do really love the wool. It creates such a beautiful texture. So this is just really fun texture in here. This one you can't really see it that well, but this is the wood grain. And so when my client, who by the way, I've never met her, she just sees my work on Instagram. Her sister-in-law got a quilt quilted from me, mailed me a quilt, and then what I asked her to do is share some of her favorite designs that I've quilted in the past, and she really loved wood grain, and this fabric to me just shouted wood grain. So lots of really pretty texture there. So within these other little spots of this gray color that's not on the exterior part of the quilt, I've decided to keep going with these triangular pieces. Okay, so here we have these lines coming back and up and down. So I thought, wouldn't that be fun just to like show a contrast with the lines? And so I created these contrasting lines, and oh my goodness, the texture is just so much fun. So you can see that the gray diamonds are coming down and they're just continuously flowing. So your eye is traveling, which is really beautiful with the custom quilting. And then here we have these really cool wavy designs. So I just decided to create that same design within the fabric. So that's really fun. It just has really nice texture, really nice movement. Here's the wood grain once again. Now, so here was this is what I was talking about, and I want you to see the difference. So I will quilt something else here, but I wanted to show you. So yes, I could create this nice border, but then I have all this open space. So you can see how having this much open space contrasted to these diamonds, contrasting to these lines, contrasting to the waves, that really jars the eye, and it doesn't provide a nice contrast, because it's like, whoa, that's really open space that's not been quilted. So then I could come in, now I could do something similar to having straight lines. I could create a plaid of some sort. I could do similar kind of ruler work where repetitive, or I could have a contrasting circular kind of design. So that's something to consider as well. Okay, so this fabric, like, hello, it's beautiful and it screams, just quilt me along the lines. So I just did some really nice squiggles and just emphasize that. So I let the fabric do the talking, and really, like, I just can't stop putting my hand on here. The texture is so lovely. So here we are again, we have this really pretty kind of flowy, watery stuff. So this one has this really fun, bubbly fabric. So I just decided to do some big texture, and I made these really pretty feathers. So that's a beautiful texture, contrasting to the straight lines to this. Now in this gray, was trying to decide, and I thought, I really love paisleys and I love that fill. And so I just did this really fun, like, paisley fill. It kind of complements the feathers because paisleys and feathers are similar. But then you have your four corners of your contrast with your straight lines. So that's really fun too. Okay, so we're just gonna keep going with all these beautiful textures. I love this one. Okay, this one, I was like, all right, so it's got the circles. Well, actually they're flowers, but they're very circular. So I thought, am I gonna compete or am I going to complement? So I thought, let's complement. And so I did this very dense repeat of the paisley or a swirl. It's kind of like an elongated swirl. So I start in the one corner, I swirl it, and I just keep going. And I could actually just go as much as I want. And then when I'm done, I just do another one and I just do the same thing. So it actually doesn't matter. So like this one, for example, it's like 3 inches. This one's like 4 inches. This one's only like 1.5 inch. This one's only 1 inch. So it actually doesn't matter how big your actual swirl is. Where the beauty comes in of the quilting is just the amount of the consistency of the repetition. So you really need to keep that in mind. So here I have this really pretty, like, floral design, because this is a super sweet little print on this fabric. So I thought, let's just complement that and just provide some really nice texture. And then this one, so cool. So it already has arrows in it. It already has this kind of very linear herringbone arrow type of fabric design. So let's not compete with it. Let's complement it and just really go on it. So I did just random lines. I segmented it, and then some of it goes this way, others point that way, this way, that way. So that's really, like, super whimsical, super fun. I'm loving that. All right, so we're almost at the end of my quilt. And so what's a beautiful thing for the eye really wants to travel. And so I've got all these diamonds that just go all the length of the quilt. And so that's a really nice flow of your quilt. And now the other thing is, so one thing to consider, so this would have been a diamond on here, but I decided to fill this as one big open space. And so it's totally, this is the beauty of free motion quilting custom work. It's totally your choice. It's how you want to do it. Now this quilt is fairly asymmetrical in that some of the ribbons start on this side and they end over there. Some of the ribbons, so they go different directions, different ways. This one, for example, didn't even turn into a ribbon. It was just one long band. So you can decide kind of how you want their eye to flow and how you want their eye to travel. And so here, for example, because I had the other diamonds, all the length of that, this was a fill. So I just centered the fill just in this one end. So at the end of that ribbon, that's what it's going to be. At the end of all the ribbons, that's the fill that you're going to see. And so that is how I chose to do this. Now the next part of this quilt is going to be, because this is their 12th anniversary this year, this quilt is actually for an anniversary present. And so my next challenge for this quilt is putting their names and their date of wedding. And so I did make my first attempt. So if you can see these little lines here where I unstitched. So to get rid of these lines, what you're going to do after you unstitch and your fingers are a little bit tender, you're going to spray water. So when you spray the water on there, then you rub it, and then you're able to get those stitch lines out of there. So I haven't finished that yet. So you're gonna have to click in the link below and see pictures of the final product and see how I nailed having their names on their beautiful wedding quilt that they will actually have it's an heirloom, so they will have it on their bed, their children can have it on their bed, and it's really exciting thing to be a part of people's lives as I live as a professional long arm quilter. Thank you so much for watching my client quarter video. I am so excited that I have the opportunity to be a part of people's lives. It really actually fills me with a lot of emotion when I think that this quilt is going to be on their bed probably for the rest of their marriage, and it could actually be for their children to have. So it really does fill me with a lot of joy that I can be a part of that, and that I could be a part of creating more love and beauty in the world. So if you have special quilts that you want to have a special touch put on them with the free motion quilting, I am your girl. If you're a professional long arm quilter and you want to develop your skills, your free motion quilting skills, if you want to help build your business, I am there to help you. So I just wanted to let you know that I have online classes. I also do one-on-one coaching for people with their business. I also have an amazing course. It's an introductory 6-week course of building a great foundation of how to run a long arm quilting business, which has been so life-changing for so many of my students. So if you have any more questions or any other concerns, all you need to do is just leave a comment in the link below, and I will definitely read them. I read every single comment. I appreciate all the time that you take in watching these videos, and I am totally here to help you to increase your skills, your talents, and your confidence as you go ahead as a professional long arm quilter.